everyone. Welcome to another episode of UX Pathways. And I have the opportunity and the pleasure to welcome Jeff Johnson. Jeff, how are you?
Fine. How are you?
Excellent. Great to have
Good.
you on the podcast. I know me personally, I've seen you speak and I am a fan of your work. However, there may be those out there that may be unaware of all the accomplishments and things that you've done in your career. What is your current role in the industry right now?
Well, I'm an adjunct professor at the University of San Francisco. I was a full-time professor there until the December of 2022. So a year ago, I retired. And before I was a professor at the university, I was a consultant. And so now I'm back to being a consultant. But during this whole time, as when I was a consultant, when I was a faculty member, and now again, I also uh, write books on UX. And I wrote a wrote a book in the late 1990s, which was published in 2000, called GUI Bloopers: Common User Interface Design Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. And that was actually a very popular book. Um, and sort of that got me going as an author in the field. And then I wrote a follow-up book called Web Bloopers, which was exclusively about the websites, and that was in the early 2000s. And then I started getting feedback that developers and UX people wanted to know why the bloopers were bloopers. What was what were they violating? And so I developed a course at the University of Canterbury in Christchurch. I was actually invited. I was given a teaching fellowship for a semester in Christchurch, New Zealand, which they call Christchurch. Uh, and uh, I taught a course on UX there, and um, as a result of developing the materials for that course, I ended up writing a book called Designing with the Mind in Mind. And that book is now in its third edition. The last edition, first edition was published in 2010. The last edition was published in 2020. Um, and that book is very popular among people who teach UX. So, I mean, one could say that, as a consultant in the industry, before I started writing these books, I made my contribution to the field by working in various companies, helping them make their products easier to use and easier to learn. But I probably made a broader contribution by writing these books and having people read them, and then applying what they learned from that uh, in to the field. And as a result of that, I got from the SIGCHI organization, the Association for Computing Machinery. Have you heard of that?
I have.
They have a sub-organization called Special Interest Group on Computer-Human Interaction, and they gave me a Lifetime Achievement Award a number of years ago. And I was kind of, when you get a Lifetime Achievement Award, it's a good thing, but it's also like, but I'm not done. I'm not dead yet.
Right.
And so, yeah, one of my colleagues told me everything you do after this is off the books. But uh, uh, so at least some of the contributions I've made through these books have been recognized by ACM SIGCHI.
Yeah, there's been a lot that you have inspired others to do, not only from being a professor, but then your published works. And I know you touch upon this in some of your books, but for those that are listening and watching, why do you think it's so hard to create a positive user experience?
Well, it- um, Well, because basically the short answer to your question is because there are constraints. There are constraints that you have to satisfy that are real world constraints. And um, my students, when I was teaching HCI, human computer interaction and UX design at the University of San Francisco for the last 7 years, um, the students all think, when I give them a project, they have a semester long project to do, and they have to come up with something that they want to design or redesign. So maybe there's some product out there that they don't like that they use, and they think they can make it better. Or maybe there's something they have an idea for a new product and they want to make it easy to use. And so they take my course, and then during the semester we put them in teams and they design that. But everyone starts out thinking, I'm a great designer, and my product that I design will be really easy to use. But I have them do usability testing of their product over all along the way. So they have to they create paper prototypes, they test those, and then they create like prototypes using Adobe XD or one of the other prototyping tools, Just in Mind or various other prototyping tools, Figma, and then they um, test those, and then they discover, wow, some people are having trouble with this great design that I designed. What's wrong with them? And I say, it's not what's wrong with them; it's what's wrong with your design. And so, basically, part of becoming a UX designer is learning humility, learning that part of the process, you don't just go into a closet and come out with a great design. You have to test it. And the testing will give you feedback about what's good and what isn't so good about your design. Um, and so that's one of the things that I teach students is that you have to learn to get input from your prospective customers um, all along the way, and that's very important.
100% agree. And it is interesting how when you're testing it continually through that continuum, how you start then, as you said, gaining that humility, which I think is really important skill, and patience, and understanding that there is some point where you will have to make a decision on when to move forward with your product. And I think there's a lot of designers, product owners that are trying to understand how to make the best product. And there are multiple ways to understand that. And I love the fact you emphasize that. And those that are thinking about getting into this field, I know you've taught a lot in your career. What advice would you give to people looking to get into being advocates for end users?
Um, well, everyone wants to be a designer, UX designer, visual graphic designer. Um, and I tell people who are new to the field, who are coming to the field, let's say from tech writing or from programming or from some other field that want to get into the place of being a designer, that they really should start with testing. That is, where you get a job as a usability tester, and um, you will find yourself learning that the designs that have been handed to you to test, which you didn't probably design, um, will are flawed, and you'll start to understand over time some of the problems. You'll see some of the same problems cropping up in different products that are being tested, and that will give you not only an idea that testing is useful, but also uh, the idea that you will start to get some intuition about what kinds of things give users problems. Um, And then that will make you a better designer when you move toward actually doing the upfront design. So that's one thing that I tell people. And then the other thing is that design, in my opinion, is not so much about um, font colors and font sizes, although those things come into play. And in fact, I talk about them in some of my books. But um, it's really important to get a handle on the flow, the flow of operation. How do I get from my goal in my head using this application on a phone or a computer to what I want, an airline ticket, a new subscription to a magazine, a some information about cancer, whatever it is I'm trying to get. How do I simplify the path from what's in my head to that goal? And um, it's really important to get that straight before you worry about should the background color be green, should the font be if serifed, that sort of thing. And so and therefore, there's actually another book that I didn't mention that I co-wrote with Austin Henderson, and we're actually rewriting it now to bring it up to date. In 2010, we wrote a book called Conceptual Models, and it was a book about how do you get the concepts that your application or website supports straight before you figure out what it looks like. What does the application look like? Because there are a lot of people, and this is also true of my students when I teach HCI, they just want to start out sketching immediately. I have an idea for a new app and I'm just going to start sketching it. And it's like, what are you sketching? What is the meaning of the app? What is it supposed to do? Who is supposed to use it? What are the tasks that they're going to have to do? How does it support those tasks? And if you don't get the concept straight, you won't, you're going to be doing drawings after drawings after drawings and throwing them away and throwing them away. It's better to actually build what I call a conceptual model first, and then do your user interface design based on that. And then, of course, test them. Again, I keep coming back to that.
I'm so glad you brought up your other book as well. That is so important to start with the goals, understand your audience before you do anything. Obviously, you want to sketch and you want to get your ideas down, but if you are sketching without a goal, you are going to end up with that product, as you said earlier, that someone may not be able to accomplish the tasks that they need to do. Great advice. And I really think if you're thinking about where to start, check out some of those books that you mentioned out there, Jeff, because I think there's some really great concepts in there. And for anyone else to discover more information about yourself, is it just a simple Google search or is there a place they should go?
Well, I have a consulting website, UI Wizards Inc., which has some information. It'd probably be more useful, that these consulting websites, this kind of 2000-y age era stuff, so or 2007 or something. I would say it's probably better. People can go to YouTube and Google my name and say user interface or something. And there are a whole bunch of talks that I've given on various subjects related to my books. That are out there on YouTube for free. I've spoken at Google several times, and they always post the videos on YouTube. Um, and I've spoken at Stanford and other universities, and they often post them there. So that's another place. um, and well, bookstores. I don't know. Maybe people don't like to read books as much as they used to, but I know I get a lot of requests when I've given a talk. Is there a video of this? Could I? Because I want to share this with my colleagues. And I said, well, the talk is based on a book, so you could get the book and actually read it. But anyway, there are lots of ways to get the kinds of things that I have been advocating over the years. And I've learned a lot myself. I mean, one of the things that really hit home for me is when I was trying to teach HCI to undergraduates. Um, you know, people who are very when you're 20 years old, you're really focused on the here and now, and you're focused on uh, you know sketches and what is my product going to look like, and getting people at that age to think in terms of abstract concepts is quite difficult, quite a challenge. I find that it's much easier to teach this stuff to professional designers than it is to teach it to um, college, juniors. And so over the years, I've had to adapt some of my teaching methods and also adapt some of my design methods in order to allow to make it more accessible to younger people.
And I think
Um,
that is a key there, being flexible, adaptable. That's really what user experience is. If you think about it from the foundation, there's the technology keeps changing. However, there still are core principles that we should adhere to, which is a lot of what you just spoke about here, Jeff. It's really exciting to have you on the podcast, share your insights. I hope everyone goes and checks out more about your talks and more of your books. And I hope that
okay.
you, as you said, continue on in this field, producing more and more great content and getting us to think about the end user, which I think all of us sometimes tend to forget about. I would
Okay.
love for everyone to follow more about you. And I just give you one last moment if there's anything else you wanted to end final thought on, but I really enjoyed you being on the podcast today.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me here. The only thing that I would add to it is that, of course, AI is coming along now and it's getting incorporated into a lot of apps, and also voice controlled user interfaces. And so, that's going to be coming along, and that's going to change a lot about how people design. And so we all have to keep learning. It's a continuing learning process, right?
I agree. And I've dabbled around a little bit with AI just to see how it could produce some prompts and haven't really moved into analyzing research. But I do think that, as you said, we have to be aware of the technology is there, but at the same point, realize that it cannot replace humans, even
Yes.
though it is a tool that we can use. So I think there's a lot there to talk on that subject. I imagine that's probably something else that you're starting to amass an opinion on.
Right. Yes. Well, that's another topic.
It sure is. Well, maybe we need to have a part two of Jeff back on the podcast at some point. So I appreciate you. Thank you for everything and best of luck to you in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.